There are words we spend our whole lives meaning to say. We write them down in the quiet of midnight, when the truth is too heavy to carry and too frightening to speak aloud. We fold them carefully, seal them with intention, and then we stop. We tell ourselves the moment has passed. We tell ourselves it will only make things worse. We tell ourselves there will be another time, a better time, a braver time. And then years go by and the words sit somewhere forgotten. And the person we wrote them for goes on living, without ever knowing what we meant to tell them. This is a story about one of those letters, and about what happens when the right words finally find the right person. 20 years too late, and exactly on time. Carol Hendricks was not a woman who left things unfinished. Her house in Portland, Oregon was organized with the quiet precision of someone who had learned early that control over small things was the only reliable comfort when large things refused to cooperate. Her kitchen was spotless by 8 every evening. Her bills were paid on the 1st of every month. Her garden was tended every Saturday morning, regardless of weather, regardless of mood, regardless of the particular weight she happened to be carrying that week. She was 61 years old. She had worked as a school librarian for 27 years, and she was, by every outward measure, a woman who had her life in perfect order. The only thing Carol Hendricks had never been able to finish was the letter she wrote to her son the night before he left. His name was Nathan. He had been 24 when he walked out of her front door with 2 duffel bags and a silence between them so thick it had its own gravity. They had argued, not for the first time, not even for the worst time, but for the last time, as it turned out. The argument had been about his father, about the choices Carol had made when Nathan was 8 years old, about a version of the past that Nathan had constructed from half-truths and the particular cruelty of a child's wounded memory. He had said things that could not be unsaid, so had she. And then he had picked up his bags and walked to his truck and driven away. And Carol had stood at the window, watching the taillights disappear, and felt something close in her chest, like a door being shut from the inside. That night she had sat at the kitchen table and written him a letter. 4 pages, front and back, in her careful librarian's handwriting. She told him the truth, the full truth, about his father, about why she had asked him to leave, about the things she had protected Nathan from knowing because he had been a child. And some truths are too adult for a child to carry. She told Nathan that she had never stopped loving him for a single day of her life, not even on the days he had made it difficult. She told him she was proud of him, in ways she had never found the right moment to say. She told him she was sorry, not for the choices she had made, because they had been the right choices, but for the way she had failed to explain them, for the times she had chosen silence when she should have chosen words. She folded the letter. She addressed an envelope. She set it on the kitchen counter beside her keys, where she would see it in the morning and take it to the post office. In the morning she picked it up, held it for a long time, and put it in the inside pocket of the old brown corduroy jacket she kept on the hook by the door. She told herself she would send it after she thought about it a little more, after she found better words for the part about his father, after she was sure it would help and not make things worse. She never sent it. The jacket stayed on the hook by the door for 2 years, then moved to the closet when she reorganized the entryway, then to a box in the garage when she redid the closet. The letter stayed inside the pocket, folded in thirds, Carol's careful handwriting preserved in the dark. Nathan did not call. Carol did not call either, because she had learned from a lifetime with stubborn people, beginning with herself, that a call made from pride rather than readiness only builds a higher wall. She waited for him to be ready. She told herself she was being patient. She told herself that when the time came she would know. The time did not come. 5 years passed, then 10. She heard about him occasionally through his cousin, Dana, that he had moved to Seattle, that he was working in construction management, that he seemed okay but kept to himself. She sent him a card on his birthday every year. She never knew if he read them. 15 years after he left, Carol was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. She went through treatment quietly, told very few people, and came out the other side diminished in some ways and strangely clarified in others. Lying in a hospital bed at 2 in the morning with your own mortality, sitting in the chair beside you has a way of reorganizing your understanding of what matters. She thought about Nathan every night during those weeks. She thought about the letter. When she came home, she went to the garage and found the box and found the jacket and put her hand in the pocket and felt the folded paper still there, soft with age, and she stood in her garage and cried for the first time in years. She still did not send it. She told herself the distance was too old now. Too much time had passed. The letter was 20 years out of date. Nathan was 44 years old. He had built a life. And arriving in it now with a 4-page letter, full of old pain and old explanations, would only reopen wounds that had perhaps finally scarred over. She told herself she was protecting him. She was practiced enough at self-deception to almost believe it. The jacket went to Goodwill. The following spring, when Carol did a serious clear out of the garage, she had held it for a long moment before placing it in the donation bag. She had not checked the pocket. She had forgotten, genuinely forgotten by then, that the letter was still inside. She placed the jacket in the bag, and tied the bag and put it by the door and drove it to the Goodwill on Morrison Street on a Tuesday morning and handed it across the counter to a young volunteer without a second thought. She drove home and made coffee and did not think about it again. Daniel Marsh was 37 years old and had been sober for 14 months when he walked into the Goodwill on Morrison Street looking for a jacket. He was not looking for anything particular. He was looking for something that felt like himself, which was a search he had been conducting for the better part of 2 years without much success. Getting sober had not been the hard part. The hard part was the life waiting on the other side of it. The life he had neglected and damaged and in some places destroyed during the years. When the drinking had been the loudest thing in every room, he had lost his marriage. His ex-wife, Patricia, had been patient far beyond what anyone could reasonably ask. And then she had been done, and he could not blame her. He had lost his apartment, his savings, and a job he had actually been good at. He had lost, most painfully, the easy relationship he had once had with his teenage daughter, Chloe, who was now 16 and looked at him with a careful, measuring expression that broke him, quietly every time he saw it. The expression of a child who has loved someone unreliably and is still deciding whether to try again. He had been rebuilding slowly. He had a small apartment in Northeast Portland. He had a new job as a project coordinator for a nonprofit. He was going to meetings 3 times a week and seeing a therapist on Thursdays and doing, in his therapist's words, the actual work. He was doing the actual work. It was unglamorous and relentless, and some days it felt like assembling a broken thing in the dark without knowing what it was supposed to look like when finished. The brown corduroy jacket was hanging on a rack near the back. It was good quality and worn soft, the kind of texture that felt immediately like something that had been lived in and loved. He tried it on. It fit well across the shoulders. He checked the price tag, $12. He checked the pockets out of habit, and his fingers found something in the inside left pocket. He pulled it out, a folded envelope unsealed, addressed in neat handwriting to someone named Nathan Hendricks at an address in Seattle, no return address. A letter inside, folded in thirds, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. He should have put it back. He knew that. It was someone else's private correspondence. Found by accident, none of his business. He refolded it and put it back in the pocket. He carried the jacket to the register and paid for it and walked to his car and sat in the driver's seat and thought about the envelope for a long moment. He drove home. He made dinner. He watched television without absorbing any of it. At 10 o'clock he picked up the jacket from the chair where he had draped it and took out the envelope and stood in his kitchen holding it. And something he could not fully name, some instinct older than reason, made him unfold the letter and begin to read. He read it 3 times. The first time he read it for the facts, a mother writing to a son, explaining something about his father, about choices made when the son was a child. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, the sentences structured with the precision of someone who had thought about every word. The second time he read it for what was underneath the facts. And what was underneath the facts was a woman laying down every defense she had ever built and simply saying, "I love you. I have always loved you. I need you to know the truth. I need you to understand that the silence between us was never indifference and was never the end of anything. It was only fear, dressed up as patience, standing at a window waiting for you to come back." The third time he read it, he stopped at one paragraph near the bottom of the 3rd page and did not continue for several minutes. "I know you believe that I chose silence because I didn't care enough to fight for you. I need you to understand that I chose silence because I was terrified that my words would push you further away, and I could not survive losing you by my own hand. Every day that passed, I told myself tomorrow. Every year that passed, I told myself there is still time. And now I am sitting at this table at midnight and I am writing down everything. I should have said the moment you walked out the door, and I am realizing that waiting for the perfect moment to tell the truth is just another name for cowardice, dressed up in patience. Daniel sat down on his kitchen floor. He was not sure when his legs had stopped working. He sat on the linoleum with the letter in both hands and read that paragraph again and felt something crack open in the center of his chest. Not painfully, but inevitably. The way ice breaks in spring. The way held breath finally releases. He had a letter he had never sent either. Not written on paper. He had never been able to get that far. It lived in his chest, half-formed and perpetually unfinished. Addressed to his daughter. Everything he had done to her by being absent and unreliable, and drunk at the wrong moments and sober too late. Everything he was trying to become and was terrified she would never believe. Everything he needed her to know about. How clearly he saw himself now, and how much of what he saw shamed him, and how none of that shame was hers to carry. He had been waiting for the right time to say it. He had been waiting until he was further along, more repaired, more worthy of her forgiveness before asking for it. He sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. Then he got up and found a piece of paper and sat at the kitchen table and began to write. He tracked down the Goodwill and called them in the morning and explained the situation. The volunteer remembered the jacket. A woman had brought it in. Older, alone, had seemed briefly hesitant before handing over the bag. She had paid with a card. After some back and forth and a manager's decision that this was an unusual enough situation to warrant an exception, they gave Daniel the name Carol, Hendricks in a general area, the Morrison Street neighborhood. It took him 4 days and a city directory and 2 wrong Carol Hendrickses before he found her. He wrote her a short note, not explaining everything, only that he had purchased a jacket from the Goodwill that contained a letter he believed was hers, and that he would like to return it to her, and that he hoped she would be willing to meet him briefly. Carol called him that same evening. Her voice on the phone was measured and careful, the voice of a woman who had learned to manage her own hope. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop on Division Street on Saturday morning. She was already seated when he arrived, smaller than he had expected from the voice, silver-haired, composed, watching the door with an expression he recognized because he had worn it himself, the face of someone who has prepared for disappointment and is trying not to want too much. He sat down across from her and put the letter on the table between them. She looked at it for a long time without touching it. Then she looked at him. "I forgot it was in there," she said. "I know," he said. "Did you read it?" He held her gaze. "Yes, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have." She was quiet. Outside the coffee shop window, Portland went about its Saturday morning. Joggers, dog walkers, a father pushing a stroller. Carol looked at the letter on the table, and something in her face moved. Some long-held arrangement shifting beneath the surface. "Does it change anything?" she asked. Not bitterly, genuinely. "It changed something in me," he said. And then, because she had been honest in that letter beyond what most people manage in a lifetime, he told her about his daughter, about the letter he had never written, about the 14 months of sobriety and the rebuilding and the Thursday therapist and the way his daughter looked at him with that careful measuring expression, about how he had sat on his kitchen floor at 10 o'clock at night reading her words to her son and had finally understood that waiting to be worthy before asking for forgiveness was just another way of staying away. Carol listened the way people listen when they recognize their own story in someone else's mouth. "I called Nathan," she said quietly when Daniel had finished. "This morning, before I came here." Daniel waited. "He answered," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. "He answered on the second ring, and I said his name, and he said, 'Mom,' just like that, like no time had passed, like we had simply been waiting on opposite ends of the same silence for someone to speak first." The coffee shop. Noise continued around them. Cups and conversation and the ordinary sounds of a Saturday. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "What did you say?" he asked. "I told him I had written him a letter a long time ago that I never sent," she said. "I told him I was going to read it to him over the phone. And he said, okay, and I did." She paused. "He cried, I cried. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours." She reached across the table and picked up the letter and held it in both hands. "He's coming to Portland next weekend," she said. "He's driving down from Seattle. He said he has things to tell me, too." She looked at Daniel across the table, and her eyes were full, but her voice was completely clear. A stranger bought a jacket from a thrift store and took the time to find me. Because of that, I called my son after 20 years. She shook her head slowly. There's no explanation for that. There's just gratitude. Daniel drove home slowly through the Portland streets. And when he got home, he sat at the kitchen table and he called his daughter. She answered on the fourth ring, cautious as always. He said her name. He said, I have some things I should have said to you a long time ago, and I don't want to wait anymore. I don't have a letter. I just have the truth, and I have right now, and I'm hoping that's enough to start with. Chloe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, okay, Dad, I'm listening. And that small, careful, extraordinary okay was everything. There are words we spend our whole lives meaning to say. Some of them we carry too long, folded in the dark pocket of our silence, waiting for a braver day. But here is what Carol Hendricks learned at 61, and what Daniel Marsh learned at 37, and what this story asks you to carry with you today. The right moment is not coming. It was never coming. The only moment there is, the only one that has ever existed, is the one where you finally decide that the person you love is worth the risk of the words. Don't wait. Don't fold it up and put it in a pocket and tell yourself there is still time. Say it now, while they can still hear you. If this story has shaken you from the inside, if there is someone in your heart too, someone you have been meaning to say something to but never have, then do not stop this video here. This is Nathan's story. This is Daniel's story. But most of all, this is your story. Like and subscribe to this channel because every week, stories come here that reach straight to the place where words cannot. And if there is someone in your life you have drifted away from, then perhaps tonight is the right moment. Find their number. Make the call. Speak first, because sometimes one old jacket, one forgotten letter, and one stranger is all it takes to remind you that time does not last forever. But love is still there waiting.